The number one overall pick is within reach for the Cleveland Browns. I'll tell you what has to happen in week 18 to get there. Coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. 3-14 was not what anyone predicted, but I do think people are getting one thing wrong when it comes to the 2024 Browns. We can rule out yet another quarterback for next season, and as I said in the intro, there's actually a pretty good shot that the Cleveland Browns could land the number one overall pick when Week 18 wraps up tomorrow after their loss to the Ravens today. We'll get into all that and more. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer, making the Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. Of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. A lot went wrong for the Cleveland Browns in 2024. That much we know. They concluded a disappointing, frustrating, throw in your adjective season on the field right behind me, M&T Bank Stadium against the Baltimore Ravens. They fall 35-10 earlier tonight on Saturday. And it puts the kibosh on what was obviously a very frustrating and just dismal season that had such high expectations. And I think that's where, Myles Garrett said after the game that this was worse than the 0-16 year in 2017, which was his rookie year. And I tend to agree from an outside perspective looking in, largely because, at least back then, you knew there was an end game. You knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel, which was, hey, we're going to stink for as long as, the stinking was supposed to be worth it. You were supposed to get players like Myles. You were supposed to get players like at the time, Baker Mayfield, your Nick Chubbs, your David Njoku's. You got all these players in order to build this thing to be a competitive team and a playoff contending team and all those different things. And it seemed like they finally got there. And then this year came out of nowhere, where there were Super Bowl aspirations for this team, and you fall flat on your face, 3-14 to finish the season, and it's just where do you go from here? This just feels so much more daunting than those years back in 0-16 and 1-15, 1-31 and 2 seasons did. And so I agree with Myles in that regard. Now, the one thing I'll say though, and I know this has been a topic of conversation, especially outside the building, where fans are kind of wondering, what did we get so wrong about this team? Did we overestimate them? And I think one of the big things that keeps popping up is, were they just not as talented as we thought? Did we overrate the talent on this roster? And that's a notion that I actually push back on. I don't think that that's true. I look at this roster and I do see a talented team, and I see a team that last year was 11-5 and in the playoffs and doing all the things that people wanted to see them do and accomplish. And I don't know how they fall off as poorly as they did. I think a lot of it was the quarterback play. I think a lot of it was just changes on the offensive staff that didn't click and work for this team. I mean, this offensive line talked all year about how they were a run first O-line for so long. And then this year you're throwing the ball 60 times a game. And it was something different. And they finally kind of embraced that late in the season, but it was too little too late. And it just took some time to get there. Coaching changes, Bill Callahan, I think we underestimated the value that he maybe brought this team and how a transition at that coaching spot would make that group regress a ton as much as they did. I also think, the offensive coordinator situation that maybe wasn't necessarily a good fit, and how they ran this offense wasn't the best fit, obviously, for Deshaun Watson at the start of the season. And then that sort of trickled down to some of the other quarterbacks as well. But I look at this roster and I'll tell you, I just don't see a team that's not every team is lacking in some areas. There's no team that's perfect where they're just stacked in the secondary and stacked on the defensive line and stacked at the quarterback position and stacked at receive. Yeah, there's teams that have bits and pieces of everything, but every team has flaws. And for this team to do what they did last year, I understand maybe it was inferior opponents and whatever. But they still you still got to go out and win those games. You still got to go out and prove it. And they did that last year with quarterback play that was it was also a carousel last year, but they got enough from that position and better play than they did this year to kind of lift them over the top with a defense that was playing obviously historically great. And I don't think the defense was as bad as people are making it out to be this year. That's an area where I do think expectations were set so high. People thought this defense was going to replicate what they did in 2023. It just wasn't possible. I tried to kind of temper those expectations. And when you look back on the season, there were so many moments where this team, like the defense did everything they could to keep them in it. And because the offense just was, I mean, they set back offenses to the Stone Age with how poorly they played at times. It was 3 and out, give the ball back. It was turnover to give a team a short field or the opponent a short field. And the defense like scratched and clawed at times to keep teams off the scoreboard. Like I don't put all that on them. I put it more on the offense this year as to why they, gave up more than 25 points a game and they're 3 and 14. So no, the defense wasn't as good, but they also weren't as bad as I think people make it out to be, to the point where some are even calling for Jim Schwartz to be fired, which I think is ludicrous. I think the defense is the least of your problems. But even on that side of the ball, yes, you got Myles Garrett. Denzel Ward had maybe the best year of his career. I think Grant Delpit at least showed you like, okay, he's an in the box type safety. He can give you something. MJ Emerson took a step back. I'll give you that. But I still think there's some promise for him. A guy like JOK is a really good player. Now, we don't know what his future holds, and that's going to be an offseason conversation that we continue to dive into. I think the defensive line has some pieces. I think Isaiah McGuire showed some things late. I think Mike Hall came on strong late. Now, he got hurt in this game today and might be coming back from a very serious knee injury, which could take some time, and that's unfortunate. And there are going to be some areas they had to address in the defensive line because they started the season with Zadarius Smith, and they don't have that guy anymore. But I don't look at the defense. I don't even look at the offense. The offensive line still has some players. Wyatt Teller, still a good guard in this league. Joe Bitonio is still playing at a pretty high level. The list, in my opinion, goes on and on in terms of like Jerry Jeudy. He's somebody who obviously emerged as a player that the Browns bet on being great, and they knocked that trade out of the park. Yeah, the Deshaun Watson thing will obviously rehash and just everything that led to and is meant it's been a disaster. But a trade that they did nail was the Jerry Jeudy trade. When you asked him after the game, what do you think he proved this year? And he said he thought he proved he's one of the best receivers in football. I think that's true. So like there is a lot of talent on this team, and they started the year with even more talent when you think about it, because Amari Cooper was here, Zadarius Smith was here, a bunch of guys who have gotten injured. So like there's talent on this team. Even a guy like Jack Conklin on the offensive side of the ball. Once he finally got back from his injuries, he played really well this year. Like that's a stable spot for you if he can stay healthy going to the next year. I don't think it's a talent problem. I just think it's in everything else. Like they didn't execute. They were shooting themselves in the foot with stupid penalties. There was too many turnovers. It's all the things where if you go listen to Joel Bitonio's press conferences after these games or his conversations at his locker after the games, it's all the things that he's pointed to. It's just been an undisciplined team. They haven't corrected a lot of the same mistakes, and it's about like refocusing on those things and doing better on the little things going into 2025. But I don't see a team that's like so no talent was, again, we go back to the 16-17 seasons. That was a team that had minimal talent. This team has talent, and that's why this season is so disappointing. But I refuse to accept that like that's the excuse. It's just, well, we overestimate how talented this team was. No, I think it is a talented team. I just think they woefully underperformed. And yes, some guys probably played back to their means rather than, they're playing at an elite level that they might have played last year, particularly on defense. But I don't think this team is lacking talent. And because of that, I do think like if their plan is let's pivot and free up as much cap space as we can and worry about the consequences later and try to stay competitive, I think they can get this thing back on track. It may seem far-fetched, but we see teams every year go from basements of divisions to postseason. And I think the Browns have a chance to do that. I do. I'm not trying to be like, totally an optimistic Oscar, if you will, at the end of the season after a 3-14 season, in a game where they got blown out and the Ravens cover what was a 20-point spread coming into the game. But anyone out there saying that they think the team that we overestimated the talent and it wasn't as good of a team as we thought, I just think that's wrong. I think I see the talent on this team, and it's just about making the right tweaks this offseason to kind of get it back on track, whether that's coaching staff, whether that's personnel, or otherwise. Along those lines, the 40th quarterback since the team returned in 1999 got the start today, and Bailey Zappi. He handled that honor by giving the Browns yet another loss, throwing a pick six. and putting together another bad performance. I'll tell you why. It's another quarterback that the Browns can cross off their list as they rethink this quarterback room in 2025. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. I can proudly say that I won the championship in one of my season-long fantasy leagues. But I'll tell you, it's been a stressful season, constantly worrying about one injury costing you a game or a season, and that's why I try to take try to take the stress out of fantasy with Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for one shot to win 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL. That's Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Again, download the app and use code Locked On NFL for $50 instantly. Prize Picks. Run your game. This show is also sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's part of your life that you want to rewrite or a plot twist that you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think as therapy as a personal editor, helping you craft the life you deserve. That's where BetterHelp comes in. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Even if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. I think we can safely cross another quarterback off the list of guys who should be back in this quarterback room next year. We know Deshaun Watson's going to be here because of the nature of his contract. Okay. From there, though, anybody that I think was on this roster this year at the quarterback position, none of them are safe. I think the last 3 weeks showed us that Dorian Thompson-Robinson, while there was some promise there, and the Browns felt like, maybe they found a diamond in the rough in a fifth round pick. I think it came to fruition the last couple games that he's not the type of player that's going to be like a starting caliber guy, and he's not really. I think he can be a backup in this league. I don't think it has to be with the Browns. I think his time here has kind of run its course, and I think you just got to rethink this room entirely and bring some different faces in here, especially understanding that like you can't just run it back with Deshaun Watson next year without some competition. I think they will do that. But I also think you add Bailey Zappi to that list. I mean, listen, guys, Bailey Zappi today, he was 16 to 31, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, threw 2 picks. One of them was a pick six. It was a fun thing to try in week 18 in a season that was obviously lost and didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. But when you look back, I mean, what was it going to get you really? And I think it was just more of the same. The offense still looked as inefficient as it has all year. It struggled to move the ball up and down the field. It struggled to put up points. They put up just a 10. It took them to the fourth quarter to find the end zone with the 1 touchdown pass he threw to Jordan Akins, and everything else in between was just it was a mess. It just lacked any sort of consistency, and it was just more of the same. So I think the jury's out on the room from this year. I guess there's the possibility that you could bring back Jameis Winston, especially given his relationship with Deshaun Watson, which he's talked about it ad nauseum. Deshaun Watson's talked about that ad nauseum. They certainly formed like a nice kinship and seemed to really feed off of each other, and so there's some positivity there. But I also think like if you believed in Jameis, I don't think you would have benched him before week 16. I like against in that Chiefs game. I think you would have kept him. I think you would have kept him as the starter, even after he struggled the way he did. In Even though he struggled the way he did in that Steelers game, I think you would have still started him because when you look back at this thing, he still gave you the best chance to win. I understand the turnovers became too cumbersome. It became too much of a problem. The Browns are putting them. The offense was getting behind the eight ball because they were turning it over so much, and that's a risk you take with Jameis. But he was also the best quarterback this team had this year, maybe even before Deshaun Watson got hurt. And why, like, once you went to DTR, I think that kind of signaled that the ship would sail. Now maybe they can sell it as, well, he was injured, he was dealing with the shoulder. Maybe that really did prevent him from playing. But that sort of popped up in the radar late in the week after they'd already made the quarterback decision that week. So I don't think that was like the true reasoning as to why Jameis wasn't playing. And so I don't know. Like I feel like that experiment kind of ran its course too. And when everybody was ready to jump on and say like, well, he's our guy for next year, I just wasn't there because of the turnovers. So if I'm being honest, like if I'm rethinking this room, I don't necessarily think Jameis needs to be back. He's a fun story. He's got the great quotes. He's got the great one-liners. It's, he makes things entertaining in a year where there wasn't a lot of entertaining football being played by this team. But I don't necessarily think he needs to be back next year. Is he an okay backup? Sure. But I think you can go out and sort of feel some things out. And if they're going to survey the veteran market the way that is being reported, I don't know that you're even going to need, like, your backup is probably either going to be Deshaun Watson or the guy that the veteran backup that you're trying to get. If you draft a rookie, maybe that's your immediate backup, or maybe he becomes the starter immediately, and you got two veterans behind. So the possibilities are endless. But what I can say wholeheartedly is that, like, we know what we need to know about DTR. We know what we need to know about Bailey Zappi. These are not quarterbacks that the Browns need to, like, be bending over backwards to necessarily bring back. They like to carry four quarterbacks in the offseason. So it's likely that, maybe they have the relationships there, so they'll keep one around for a while. But I think when you get to the start of next season, like, if DTR is like your fourth quarterback on this team, I think they're finally gonna not be so afraid to shop him or cut him. Like this year, they still sort of hung on to the hope of, maybe he could get some trade value, or maybe there was still something there, and they felt pretty good about him. Now they have their answers. So I just don't think that's going to be part of the conversation with him anymore. And like in some ways, maybe they made the wrong decision on that too, because Tyler Huntley looked pretty damn good against them when they played the Dolphins last week, and they might have made the wrong decision on who to keep as kind of their third string guy in that way. So again, I think DTR's run his course. I think Bailey Zappi, I don't know that they were planning on bringing him back anyway. I think he was Hail Mary signing when Deshaun got hurt is, hey, we just need a third quarterback, so he's going to be our guy. You gave him a shot today. He played the first three series. One of them was a pick six. DTR got one series, and then Kevin Stefanski went back to Zappi, and he said that was kind of the plan, but he wanted to make a final determination after that series DTR got, and he said just based on how the game was going, he went back to Zappi and gave it a shot. And listen, like, Zappi played. He had some good moments. There were some good throws, especially in the second half. There were some balls he missed, though, and that's kind of what you're going to get with Bailey Zappi. So I'm honestly at a point where, again, Deshaun's back next year, like I said at the top of this segment. But outside of that, like, let's get some fresh blood in here. Let's try something different. Whether that's a rookie that you draft, whether that's Kirk Cousins, whether you even got a shot at Sam Darnold, I don't know. But I like the guys that were here this year. Like, I don't need to see them. They all were part of an offense that was historically bad. Jameis was the only one that seemed to breathe some life into it, and he turned the ball over too much. And at this point, you know what you're going to get with him too. So as far as the quarterback room goes next year, Deshaun Watson and fill in the blank. None of those blanks to me should have the names of the guys that were on this team this year. Maybe somebody sticks around for the offseason, like I said, because they like to carry four quarterbacks. But by the time next season rolls around, I'm expecting this group to look much different behind Deshaun Watson or with Deshaun Watson involved. And I don't think we'll see any of these guys back in 2025. Final segment coming up, and there is a realistic chance that the Browns end up, after when Week 18 concludes on Sunday, with the number one overall pick in the draft. I'll tell you what has to happen and why it's not as far-fetched as it might have seemed just a mere couple weeks ago. That's coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Week 18 is here. It's already underway, and there's plenty more action coming your way on Sunday, which means there's just 1 week left in the regular season, postseason just around the corner. That said, it's not too late to get in on the action with America's #1 sports book at FanDuel before the playoffs get underway and even once the playoffs get going. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm a big anytime touchdown parlay builder, especially in the playoffs coming up. I sometimes dabble in the first touchdown scored bets. I like doing that. It's a lot of fun in the postseason. Raises the stakes a little bit when those games get rolling. So there are many ways for you to win. Here's an easy one. Although I guess it's over now. But if you bet on a Browns quarterback to throw a pick, that one hit again today because Bailey Zappi did that twice for you. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook sponsor of the NFL. All right, so I think I talked about this late in the week, but there is a realistic chance that the Browns end up with the #1 overall pick. And I'm coming back to this topic because with the loss on the field behind me on Saturday, officially in the books as a loss for the Browns, they finished 3-14. They are now in the driver's seat. I shouldn't say the driver's seat because the driver's seat insinuates that they got it like locked up the way that the Giants did last week if they had just lost. They're not in the driver's seat, but they are guaranteed now number 3 or better in the draft. That's good news for you as a fan of this team. If that's what you were kind of hoping for late in the year, it's maybe the one consolation prize you get from a miserable season is okay, you're going to have a top 3 pick. And there's endless possibilities when you have a top 3 pick because there's quarterbacks on the board that you could potentially be in the mix for. There's maybe if you don't get a quarterback, the #1 graded player that's a non-quarterback on everybody's board. Or there's the possibility of trading back and accumulating more picks. And for a team like the Browns that have a lot of needs to sort of address and some areas that they want to refill and bolster, that's a possibility that I think is on the table for them as well. So a lot of possibilities, a lot of options here. And that's the good news for the Browns that they're locked in as at least the #3 pick. If they want to get the first overall pick, and it's actually pretty possible, there are 2 things that have to happen on Sunday, which might be many of you might be listening to this podcast on Sunday morning, getting ready for these 1 o'clock games that don't include the Browns this week. They need the Patriots to lose, and they need the Titans to lose. Those are the 2 teams ahead of them. Patriots have the #1 pick right now. Titans have the #2 pick. And as crazy as it sounds, because those are 2 bad teams, as we know, it's not that far fetched that could actually happen. And the reason is the Patriots are playing the Bills. Bills have nothing to play for in Week 18. They're locked into the #2 seed. They can't move up. They can't move down. That's where they're going to be. And so the Bills, I know they're starting Josh Allen only because he has a streak of starts under his belt. He's played like 100. He started like 115 straight games. He's trying to make it 116. So he'll probably play like the first series, and that'll be it. They'll get him out of there. And the rest of the starters, Sean McDermott basically alluded to the idea that he's going to sort of sit these guys. And so the Patriots have a decent shot at winning that game. Drake May is apparently going to play. He has a hand injury, but he's apparently going to play. Like they're going into that game trying to win. And again, there's a real possibility that they pull that off, lose out on the first pick, and that would move the Browns up at least 1 spot. And then the Titans are in a similar situation because they're playing the Texans, who can't move out of the 4 seed. They are locked in as the #4 seed in the AFC. D'Amico Ryans kind of hinted at like he wants to sort of build some momentum for the playoffs. So his guys are going to be ready to play his starters. And so I think he's probably going to play them for a little bit of time. But the Texans lost to the Titans already once this year when the Texans were actually trying to win that game. And now they're in a situation where like they probably will play the starters for a little bit and then pull them just to avoid injury. They've had so many injuries this year anyway, like at the wide receiver position, especially Tank Dell a couple weeks ago, Stephon Diggs early this season. Like, why risk it? And so similarly, that might be an opportunity for the Titans to swoop in and sort of steal a game that nobody thought they were going to. And if those 2 things happen, your Cleveland Browns end up with the #1 overall pick in the draft, which I talk about endless possibilities. The best possible outcomes and possibilities come from having the #1 overall pick because then you're in line to either draft the quarterback that you want above all else, draft the best player on the board, or get a king's ransom to trade out of that spot to a team that really does want a quarterback and make some magic happen elsewhere with your roster. So again, it might seem like a long shot. Those are the things that have to play out, but it is a reason for you even though the Browns play on Saturday and their season is officially over, you're going to want to be locked into at least the 1 o'clock games on Sunday to see those two results specifically. So in a way, like, yeah, the Browns season is over. They didn't really have anything of consequence except for draft positioning to play for in Week 18. But it gives you something to still be excited about watching and cheering for as a fan of this team tomorrow, to see if they can actually end up with the number 1 overall pick. So I don't think it's as far fetched as people maybe thought it was a couple weeks ago, which is crazy to think about because it did seem like it was going to be a long shot when the Giants were sort of locked in there and they were so bad. We know they needed a quarterback that they lost it last week with the win they got. There were some other teams ahead of them that had to lose. You knew there was going to be some outcomes that impacted that when the Raiders and Jags played, and the Jags and Titans played, and so those things obviously led to them sliding out of a top 4 or 5 pick and making some opportunities for the Browns. But there are more opportunities to be had because, again, I think there's a real chance those two teams, both Titans and the Patriots, could lose on Sunday. I think that's what you're rooting for. I think that's what most Browns fans are rooting for. Um, and that, I think, will set the tone if it happens for an offseason where the Browns have a lot of questions to answer. But after a year that was so disappointing, it would certainly generate some excitement if they somehow end up with the number 1 overall pick and fans have some sort of hope to cling to in terms of the future and what that pick maybe brings to the table. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for, as always, for joining me to talk about your favorite football team, even as they lose yet again and to put a bow on what was obviously a frustrating season for you, for the team, for everyone in Cleveland. It has been frustrating, and it's been frustrating for me to cover. I enjoy it better when the team's winning, but I've enjoyed the conversation with you, and I can promise you we're not done. Locker room clean out on Sunday. We'll have a podcast episode for you after that because I'm sure there'll be plenty to break down. Obviously, throughout the offseason, there's going to be a ton of stuff still to come. So I hope that you continue to make this podcast, the Locked On Browns podcast, your first listen every day. For your second listen, be sure to check out one of the new Locked On NFL shows. Or if you want to keep it local, you can check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon as Sunday. But for now, from Baltimore, one final time for the regular season, I'm out.